Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Lila Aridi Afas, and on behalf of Women in International Trade's DC chapter, I'm honored and delighted to host this conversation with a world-renowned artist. And this is a rare treat for us WIT members because we not only get to talk about trade, but we also get to talk about music and art. And so I'm just going to give a very brief introduction for our esteemed guest, and then we'll go into questions. And so, as many of you saw in our promotional materials, we have a very special interview today with Ms. Dana Alfredane, who is Qatar's first female contemporary composer, singer, songwriter, and who has work and collaborations that span the globe, literally from the United States, the United Kingdom, and throughout the Middle East. So truly a treasure to have right here on our very own personal webinar. Dana is actually here in Washington, D.C. this week, which lucky for us. We just regret that we could not hold this in person due to COVID protocols and are doing it virtually. But Dana gave a live performance last night at the Reach at the Kennedy Center. And it was a very special way to honor the Qatar USA Year of Culture, which they kicked off at the beginning of 2021. So I could not think of a more splendid way to really celebrate the special relationship that we share. And Dana actually presented her composition Rising, which was in collaboration with the US Air Force's Central Band. So again, a great way to sort of demonstrate the bond between our countries and sort of the harmony between our cultures. I think that's a very symbolic way to do it. And we had the privilege of hearing this beautiful song during our WIT International Women's Day event, which we did in partnership with the Embassy of the State of Qatar back in March, International Women's Month. So the impact of Dana's work is truly essential throughout the Middle East and North Africa region. And she is the first female English singing artist to emerge from Qatar and really building cultural bridges and everything through her beautiful voice and her beautiful music. And shockingly, she's self-taught, which it's really astounding to me to be so talented at your own direction. And she's an artist and founder and CEO of DNA Records, which is Qatar's very first recording company. And it really is giving the country's, burgeoning music industry a global platform. And so Dana is just such a tremendous role model for so many people, not just in her home country, but around the world. And her first critically acclaimed album, Paint, was released in 2013. And it was produced in London and mastered at the legendary Abbey Road Studios, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about that experience. And in 2017, Dana released her second orchestral album, Sandstorm, which was released at Katara Studios in Doha. And her second album, she entered a commercial deal with Qatar Airways to compose music for their fleet of aircraft. So that's exciting and gives you yet another reason to want to visit Qatar. And needless to say, the sky is the limit for Dana's contributions to not only Qatari music, but the entire world's collection of music. And so with that, I would love to engage in our conversation. So first, Dana, let me welcome you to WIT.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here with such a distinguished organization run by women and revolved around women, and also to be here in Washington to have the opportunity to have performed at the Kennedy Center. I mean, it's just it's a phenomenal experience. So yes, everything together is just great.
Yeah, it's quite a week, right, to have here. So, I'm fascinated by the fact that you actually studied international affairs earlier, and many of us within WIT have studied international affairs or economics or trade, of course. I'm very curious, just in your own words, about your path from that to gemology to being a world-renowned recording artist. I mean, it's just phenomenal. Could you just share a little bit more about that experience?
think there's more synergy when you really look at international relations and the role of cultural diplomacy, and how my mandate with my work, how I present my work, the specific occasions in which I present my work, and what that means to us as women, what that means to us as a nation, what that means to us as Arabs, how we consolidate, how we're at a period of time, especially my particular region, where we're really consolidating our cultural framework. We're really consolidating our narrative in terms of, our exports, our cultural exports, our soft power. So this is such a fascinating period of time. And I think that having studied international relations, it's really given me the toolkit and ecosystem basically to be able to present my work in a way that is beneficial to those, to that story, to those aims, to talking about our identity and again our cultural export.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to frame it. And I think you probably incentivized a lot of people now to study international affairs. So your alma mater should definitely thank you for that. And so beginning with your
think I've been saying that a lot, and I said that yesterday, that that experience, 4 years studying international relations, really impacted direction of my life. Gemology was a stint in the middle because my family are in jewelry, so it was great to have that knowledge base, to have the technical knowledge base. But when I was pregnant, I decided to completely shift my course in terms of my future in the family business, and I directed my entire energy and path towards becoming a composer, which, as you can imagine, is definitely no easy feat.
no.
Full-time job.
Well, impressive that you took on not only a new career, but one that's so different from your background, especially when you had children. I mean, that takes tremendous dedication.
Was,
And I'm
it was
no.
nerve-wracking to say. I had a newborn, and then pursuing that particular path, but it worked out. So where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is that you're not only, a singer, but you're a composer, you're a recording artist, and you're a producer. I mean, it's how did that, can you elaborate on how that happened? I mean, did you go into it saying, I'm going to do all of the above, or was it just one sort of pulled you in and you expanded from there?
Well, I think because I hadn't done it before, because it was something completely new, and I had no footing in the music industry.
Mm,
Had to learn to create everything, to create the product. So it wasn't like I could go up to a whole bunch of people and say, "Can you help me generate this?" I had no idea. I didn't know the slightest thing about putting together a track. I have played music my entire life, but my direction was always supposed to be in composition,
mm,
and eventually there were different occasions which necessitated me to there were different occasions which necessitated me to sing, and those were situations in which my voice was coming to the surface for a particular message, for a
mm.
particular occasion, and then that's how the singing sort of became interwoven with what I do. But at the beginning, right at the beginning, I was singing my first album because it was my story. So I was coming out saying, this is the direction that I'm heading. And it wouldn't make any sense if I just appeared in the scene, all these instrumental tracks. And it's like, what is that? So Paint, as the name already suggests, is really my sort of my story. It's talking about the layers underneath the surface, because the surface is what I've been living with my entire life. I had no idea there was an entire world that was bubbling inside that was going to generate my entire, that was going to generate a new possibility for me. And that's the most authentic path that I've taken. So it really comes from a real place, but I had no idea. So Paint was about me uncovering the layers and going into the core and
Mm.
unveiling the space that is responsible for this truth, for this direction. So it was, so I was singing Paint at the beginning, telling my story with my own voice. Nobody else can do that for you. You know, no one else can portray your narrative better than you can, regardless of whether I like the sound of your voice or not. It's your story. So that's what happened at the beginning. But the love of my life was really composing. That's what I want to do the rest of my life. I was composing some songwriting, mainly for musical theater, but neoclassical music, film music, that's what I genuinely want to do. So I understood that art is multifaceted. And today we don't have a strict boundary around the mediums that you use to express yourself. And so my latest album, Indigo, is really my exploration of really expanding the capacity of several mediums rolled into one to translate a thought. And that's my audiovisual album, Indigo,
Hmm.
which will also eventually incorporate some movement, some dance, but in terms of shadow. So there are many different elements that we've put together to generate this one product. And that's the direction that I'm heading towards.
That's fascinating. And I think, for our audience who, if they have not had the pleasure of listening to you or watching the visual medium, the passion really comes through in your voice, and that's whether you're singing in Arabic or in English. And I think to your point about authenticity, you're right. If you had written those words and composed that score for someone else, they wouldn't have conveyed that same sort of vigor with it, and it wouldn't have resonated as much with those who listen to it, because again, it's your story, right? So and again, not only have you composed and sung, you actually started a recording studio. I mean, that's really impressive. And I'm curious, sort of given geographically speaking where Qatar is located, right, and literally the heart center of the planet, and what your vision is for DNA Records in terms of producing artists locally, globally. I mean, what do you see?
I'm sorry, I wanted to intervene, but I didn't want to intervene during the introduction. So, DNA Records is not a record label. I don't have a recording studio. I
Yeah,
work in Katara Studios. DNA Records, because obviously in Qatar there was no production entity. There was no
right.
business platform to support these sort of activities. So I would have had to register a company in order to generate these, music related, let's say, initiatives. And there were a few things that I was doing with that. In terms of, there were a few things I was doing with that. So I was putting together some shows. I was putting together, at the end of the day, we can look at this as a product, right?
Mhm.
Any product, you need a shelf to place it on. You would need a marketplace to for you to exchange goods and have access to consumers. So I had to establish an entity to govern that, to govern these activities, which hadn't previously existed in Qatar. So we hadn't had things like royalties. We still don't. That's something that we're working on at the moment. So it's very difficult to incentivize an artist. And so I thought, well, you know what, let's generate a commercial entity that we can start to build upon and start to, place these like a holding, and place these products that we're creating, like my first musical, Broken Wings, and then, Rumi, my next musical, Indigo, all these different products. We wanted to generate a commercial entity that was able to house that and govern.
No, thank you very much for clarifying that. I'm sorry to have misled anyone, but I have no doubt that you will probably own many recording studios in the future if that is your goal, or have investors who want to take that on. On the issue of royalties, just because I know we have many lawyers within our membership, I'm curious if you could elaborate on that a little bit, just because again, that is huge incentive for artists here in America. So could you explain more what the situation is in Qatar?
Yes, well, basically, we haven't had the infrastructure that was able to commercialize music as a product. And so it wasn't a big enough, I mean, it generally wasn't a big enough market, which is why the World Cup is a very big deal for us right now, because of other markets. So it expands our reach. So so previously, there was no incentive for an artist to create a product. There was no incentive for there to be an infrastructure to commercially exploit that product because it was too small of a market. So it would just be placed in a larger one like Dubai, and Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia was usually the recipient of Khaliji artists, vocalists, let's say. And the Emirates, Dubai was a hub, was a media hub. Then the blockade happened, and that's when everything shifted. Then I think that's when Qatar understood that we have to take, we have to be self-sustaining, and we have to start to generate a robust infrastructure that can house many different diverse commercial initiatives.
Yeah.
So
No, that is fascinating to think about that. And uh, just sort of one of the unintended consequences that became a benefit, right? And I'm curious for your vision for Qatar with the music industry. I mean, as it builds this infrastructure, and again, you as an example, what do you envision it becoming like the Nashville of the region, or in Atlanta, which are big, huge music hubs here in the United States? I mean, where do you think we could go with this?
well, I think that Qatar could be. I love that you've not used Nashville as an example. I love Nashville. Uh, I also love country music, but Qatar basically as a content creating hub. That's how we envision it in many different areas. That's how we Qataris generally envision it. So the direction now, especially with the World Cup, is rather than importing talent, we create an ecosystem to house talent, to incubate them, to be able to start to create original content for export rather than constantly importing intellectual property. So this is really an important direction that we've decided to, that we've as a nation been heading towards for a while, especially with organizations like Qatar Foundation. You know, we could see that Qatar Foundation is there with the intention, you know, the mandate to unlock human potential. So it's really pushing the human resources in order to contribute to creating products, intellectual or commercial for export rather than importing talent.
Right, and as you're building that infrastructure and creating that ecosystem, are there currently entities or institutions that artists can use to help them establish themselves? Like, for example, entertainment lawyers who can help structure deals or help them sort of commercialize, if you will, the product, and maybe it help trade?
Not yet. So not currently. We haven't got lawyers or anything like that, but that's the next step. That's exactly what we need to start to look at. So there's an organization called Katara Studios in Qatar, and that is the first sort of step towards that hub. It has production facilities, recording studios, video editing suites. So
No.
it basically is like a one-stop shop for all of your entertainment needs. As an artist, you can go record over there. There's a mixing engineer over there. Well, he's a Grammy Award-winning mixing engineer over there. One of the best mastering engineers in the world. So you really have access to top-notch resources over there. Now, in terms of things like royalties and lawyers and all that, that is another important step to start to really tighten everything, and again incentivize more artists to start working, because it's an expensive undertaking, so you really
Yeah.
need, yeah, royalties are definitely need to come in at some point.
So, you mentioned the World Cup. And so I have to say that in 2019, it was announced that you'll be the composer of Qatar's Lusail Stadium, the official song. That'll be played at the opening and closing ceremonies of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And so from your perspective, I mean, you've spoken a little bit about this, but how can Qatar really use that as a tremendous opportunity to further this ecosystem and to really put it on the map? And I should share that in a prior role, I actually worked on helping the Qatari government with some of the building of facilities in Doha related to the World Cup. So that's sort of how I've got to know your friends at the embassy so well over the years. So
That's wonderful. So in what capacity were you consulting, or were you setting it, were you?
I worked at that time with a private engineering construction firm located here in the US that was helping build out some of the basically just the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, but also helping with some of the safety security concerns for the games themselves.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah,
So
there's lots.
2015, yeah, 2015 I was there, yeah, long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on right now. Lusail Stadium, I composed the piece for Lusail Stadium. Hopefully it will be uh played at the opening, closing. So, fingers crossed. Um, and I think that this is a very, I mean, I don't think I know. Um, this is a very exciting time for all of us because, like I said, now, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to have access to such a huge stream of people looking at what you're doing. So you have a product, you have the biggest market in the world waiting to consume it. So it really is, I think it stimulated a lot of creativity and really up the drive and incentives to create and uh, to innovate.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be so exciting. I can only imagine what the energy level is on the ground as we approach next November. Um, and speaking World Cup, but also Qatar Airways, as I mentioned. How did you become the voice of Qatar Airways, which for anybody who has not flown it is just an absolutely luxurious experience. I swear, the economy cabin is like business class on most air carriers. It's if you actually have the privilege of being in business or first, it's out of this world. So that's pretty impressive. Well, how did that come about?
Well, basically, it was an agreement at the beginning. I basically approached Qatar Airways to say to suggest something for their boarding music, and I got to speaking to someone that was in charge of marketing at the time, and we were talking about how Qatar Airways is so authentic and provides such incredible services. And obviously my area is music. So I came and I said, well, what about the music? Can I do something with that? It was as simple as that. I was like, well, you know what? Let's bring the opera house to the airplane. And at the same time, I really wanted to showcase my National Symphony Orchestra, the Qatar Philharmonic Orchestra. So what I decided to do was approach the airport and say, well, listen, can we place the orchestra in front of the iconic teddy bear in the airport? And we did. We placed our entire symphony orchestra there. And the idea was just talking about, so we start from the desert. The song was called The Beginning. That's not the piece for Qatar Airways, but it's associated with the airport. And this is what brought forward the collaboration with Qatar Airways. So that became quite popular. And I think it was really important to showcase again, our incredible resources, our incredible musical and artistic resources in the country, and the value for art that we hold. So I wanted to, so I wanted to share that with the world and really bring what we have, to really utilize what we have. And so I said, well, let's do like a from the opera house to the airplane, and then you have a symphony piece composed bespoke for you. So that began the partnership, and and now we're just having a great time with it.
What a great demonstration of initiative. I really think that's such a terrific story. And I love that image, bringing the opera house to the airways and bringing the opera house to the stadium. And speaking of the opera house, I learned that you are the cultural ambassador for the Qatar Philharmonic Orchestra. And talking about all these ways to really advance Qatar. And we've had a prior event where we talked about sort of the establishment of your commercial attaché office at the embassy. But how do you foresee the arts as being a key mechanism to develop your nation's economy? And again, more from exporting the talent that you have in country rather than importing it from overseas.
So basically, I think that it's been, first of all, establishing, in infrastructure is really important, but also the initiative to start to create is what generates the drive, what generates the drive in terms of the people, when they see that, okay, you know what you have to say matters, people are receptive to what you have to say, then that, that pushes the incentives for people to want to create rather than import. And we do have all the pieces of the puzzle together. It's just about putting them together and learning how to use them and being productive with them.
Yeah, and in terms of being productive and creating the infrastructure, I mean, a big topic in the trade world right now is digital trade, right? For so many years, it's focused on the physical movement of goods, like things you can touch. But the element of the services industries and digital, whether it's streaming videos or music. And so how do you think that relates to what your goals are for really expanding the ecosystem for the Qatari, like indigenous music and artist industry?
Well, I mean, right now, everything, the fact that you now have digital platforms to showcase your work, you can self-release. I mean, that already has established a movement, that already has boosted the incentives to generate these products, generate these music-based products. Definitely, I think that there could be more of a initiative to centralize it, in order to really to be a little bit more centralized, in order to make sure there is a level of quality control, there's a level of exposure that is necessary for the different products. So it's not just everyone's just coming out there releasing. Well, we need to have a concerted effort to basically manage this marketplace. Not saying that it has to be a regulated marketplace, but neither completely laissez-faire. So it's when it comes to digital assets, as we know, and we've seen, the trends now with cryptocurrency and it moving from this sort of, from a rogue sort of system to now becoming much more regulated and governments getting involved. And we're going to see the same thing with NFTs as well. NFTs now has become such a huge trend in music.
Mhm.
After COVID has, has really slowed down our capacity to tour and to generate revenue from that stream.
Mhm.
So we're going to see some highly volatile trends in that area. But I think that there just could be a more concerted effort for a certain degree of regulation in order to start generating a more, let's say, stable economy around digital musical based products.
In terms of that regulation, what about like protecting their products? So like intellectual property and things like that. I mean, is that something not just in your home market, but just as you share your music worldwide that you're concerned about?
For sure. So definitely, I mean, there are certain industry practices that we generally abide by, but for sure, there are, as you expand, as you move forward, as you start to generate, more content, we definitely have to take the time, the time that it requires to actually protect that from within, and start like generating cultivating a support system around that. So one of these things, there's just something, for example, that I definitely could do with more of. So
Mhm.
I would give any artist an advice. It's like, just get your house in order from the beginning, you know, get all your paperwork done, get your contract sorted, get your templates done beforehand. Because once you're running, it's just so
Mhm.
difficult to keep going back and backtracking. And, it takes a lot of time. So for us artists, we don't want to be doing that sort of stuff. Not what we do, but that it really is important because you're going to have to do it eventually. And then if you leave it for the end, that's just going to take a lot more of your time at the beginning.
Yes, and as we would say in economics, the opportunity cost of you filling out paperwork versus creating your art is not ideal. And I'm curious, just because you started in London, so what was the experience of recording in London versus in your home country? I mean, what were the differences in doing it in those two different places?
Well, we didn't have guitar studios at the time, so we didn't have like a world-class recording studio. Also, I was pregnant with my daughter and
Mhm.
decided to become a musician. So I I was pregnant with my daughter, and then I gave birth in London. And I was I was recording the album towards the end of my pregnancy, so I had several false alarms, um, probably just the vibrations, and so the vibrations of me recording. So it was it was definitely it was an experience. I mean, I didn't choose it, but my producer at the time chose Abbey Roads, a legendary studio. And of course, for me, that was like, that was an affirmation that I was in the right path. Um, I'm a huge Beatles fan, and it was just an experience, like just being so close to something so historical and that has been such a huge pillar of this field that I'm so passionate about is just, the feeling is second to none. So it was an amazing experience, and it was one of those things, one of those experiences that you're like, this is it, that just makes you, that consolidates your drive. You're just like, this is it. So whatever challenges you're going to face, you go back to that feeling and you're like, remember that moment? This is it. Nothing compares to this. So, and at the same time, I was giving birth. So it was hilarious. I remember when we had strings recording in Rack Studios, um, my producer calls me up and he was like, so we're here. When would you like to, I mean, and whenever you're ready, like we're about to go. There are unions. String players cannot be playing more than a certain period. I'm like, so I'm in labor currently, but I will call you and let you know when I can come in. He was like, okay, carry on. It was really funny. I'd just been given, I'd been induced. I've been given the epidural. Um, and my water broke before any contractions really. Um, so I was induced and I was given the epidural. So I was like completely out of it. And he called me up and I was just very, casually said, yeah, I'm just in labor, but I'll keep you posted and I'll come in when I can. I was like, okay, well, carry on, do your
Yeah,
thing.
I can't imagine how quickly he wanted to hang up that phone.
Bless
Oh
him.
my goodness. Wow, that's how momentous. I mean, to give birth to your daughter and your first album. I mean, that really is what an amazing experience. Um, and you mentioned sort of the impacts of the pandemic on the ability to tour and travel and things like that. I'm curious what the other impacts have been, either the any upside and again the unintended consequences of the blockade and developing your own ecosystem within Qatar. And I hate to bring up COVID questions, but the reality is that we've been living with it for over a year and a half, and unfortunately, it looks like we'll continue to live with it for a bit. And it's the reason why we're doing this on Zoom instead of in person. So, I'm just curious what that has been like for you.
Well, I think for me, that whole, the pandemic, other than being the most frightening experience of my life, for sure, all of our lives, especially at the beginning when we had no idea what was going to happen, um, it was also an eye opener. It was the first time that all the noise on the outside has been drowned, and the only thing you're left with is what's on the inside. And so it really shifted my approach to a lot of things, and these were necessary shifts. And I'm sure a lot of people have said the same thing. Because of lockdown. It's the first time that we're forced to remain with ourselves. And the funny thing is that's what we're constantly running from. And so that is what gave birth to my album Indigo. I wrote it right at the beginning of lockdown. And it was basically my attempt to just capture that space that is outside the noise, capture that value for looking within rather than without for answers, for expanding that connectivity with yourself and therefore with people around you, developing more authentic, well, giving space to your authenticity to be what is more, for your authentic self to be what is more present in the surface. Because we're just, with life and everything being so mechanized and institutionalized, we just don't realize how many layers we place on top of that self. And we do that naturally. That's just, that's human nature, and it's a coping mechanism and it's necessary. But, sometimes we just step back and we're like, wow, where have all these layers come from? And what is that? What am I? What exists on the inside? And so, yeah, so that's the whole point of indigo. Indigo is the color of wisdom. I chose indigo because it's the color that is the human eye is least sensitive to. So the idea behind this initiative is by virtue of reaching indigo, you have expanded your capacity to absorb information, and you've expanded your sense of connectivity with yourself and with your surrounding.
Wow,
And
that's really powerful.
um, that has psychological implications to the to the drive of that specific piece. It begins with red, so the song called Chromium, which is a very guttural sort of call to action almost. Starts quite soft, but then really, you have this sense of urgency to move forward. And then it moves all the way to Indigo as a penultimate song. It's the only song which I sing in the album. And that's the first single. And then right after Indigo is Stillness. So that's the journey. You go from a very complex infrastructure, red, that beating, pounding rhythm, and then you start to elevate to a much more simpler framework. Because again, once we shed, everything is very simple. The relationships are simple. Our decisions become simple. Everything becomes much simpler because they're not rooted on layers that don't belong to us. So it becomes simpler, and then your voice, by the time we reach Indigo, your voice rises to the surface. And then after that is Stillness.
Wow, that really, you basically summed up, the forced introspection of COVID, really, that really is such a beautiful way to illustrate which were sometimes painful, right?
Yeah.
And challenging emotions, but ultimately get to that point because you didn't have all the, you're right, you didn't have all the distractions like, oh, I got to get to this reception and pick up my kid and then go do this and go do that. And what are you left with without that busyness, as yourself, and who is that self? And I think that as sort of schedules start to pick up a bit, I think if we can hold on to that stillness, right,
Yeah.
that piece of self, as the world hopefully returns to somewhat normal, that will be sort of one valuable lesson learned through what has been a tragedy for the entire world community. And then I see that questions are popping up in our chat. And before I go to audience Q&A, I was wondering if you would sing us a few verses of your songs in either English or Arabic or both, or whatever you feel more comfortable with. But I think it's been such a tremendous opportunity to speak with you. And I really think that would be such a wonderful, wonderful present for our entire audience.
Thank you. If I had a piano, I would do it with pleasure, but I can't sing a cappella without the piano.
And I don't have a piano either, so I
Followed you.
but even
But
if I did, I couldn't play it. So that would be the difference. Well, thank you, and I will just direct everyone to the website.
wonderful. We have, like I said, Indigo is now out. The single is out on all streaming platforms, and you can watch the video on YouTube, and you can really follow that narrative visually. So yeah, very excited to
So
finally.
curious if it makes a difference to you if we want to download it, which platform we download it from. Does it make a difference?
All the same, really. So Spotify, iTunes, whatever it is that you have.
Okay, I've always wondered that, if it actually on the from the artist perspective, if there was any sort of different. Oh, how funny. I just see a question here. Donna, do you think streaming services such as Apple Music and Tidal are beneficial to artists in terms of cost-effective distribution? And thank you for this interview.
Yes, absolutely, and you're welcome. They are beneficial to artists, especially when you go through, a strong distributor. They're great. Your distributor can help you get playlisted with them. They can help you, your exposure with them. So not just sort of appear on their streaming platforms, but actually push your product into the market. So that is more dependent on the distributor rather than the streaming platforms. What, the services you're getting from your distributor. And most distributors go through, they will get your product on all streaming platforms, but obviously some are more willing to, sorry about that. Some are more willing to, let's say, support you more, offer more support to the artist.
Oh, that's interesting. That's great that something like that exists. And so I just want to let you know that a lot of people say, I don't have a question, but we love Indigo in the video and we love you. So you have many
Yeah.
fans joining us today, which is exciting. I do have a question. How has your music career been impacted by the growing interest in Middle East affairs?
That's an amazing question. It has been, it's been, there's definitely been much more interest to actually hear and see. There's more interest to ask questions. There's more interest to actually be exposed. And now that obviously there is a growing interest in Middle Eastern affairs, my gender, there's also been a lot of interest in the fact that I'm a woman from the Middle East. So that's really come hand in hand. And also, a lot of what I do is impacted. And of course, a lot of what I do is influenced by, let's say, Oriental or music that could be labeled as Arabic. And my heritage features quite prominently in what I do. And I really use that as an opportunity to try and shift perspectives about my region. So they both go hand in hand, like a growing interest in Middle Eastern affairs has given me much more opportunities, because people want to listen, people want to see what that's all about. And it's also given me the platform to, shift predisposed notions about what my region looks like.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting question. It's from someone who's from the Philippines, but has been living in Doha for 15 years. And her question is, for her, as an expat in Qatar, she wants to know how you can unite all different nationalities through music.
Well, music is a universal language. We all have, there are certain chords within music, there are certain movements, there are certain progressions. We all know them. There's that part in the song that tugs all of our heartstrings. And that just points to the fact that, in our core, we're all the same. The way we react, the way music sort of, targets our emotions. And like I said, the way we react to certain chord progressions, to certain movements within a song, we all react the same way to minor chords, for example. We all react the same way to tension within music, right? So we don't need to speak the same language for us to react that way. It's the universal language.
Yes, that's a very, very well said. And I think that's why it's so powerful, right? When we can have that shared experience through music. I have another question about what collaboration opportunities exist for US media companies and Qatari artists.
What media opportunities exist? I think that
or collaboration opportunities. So
for Qatari artists and artists in general, you generate your own opportunities. So, with art, it's not a matter of inputting yourself in a structure. It's about defining what your art looks like and then finding a space in which it could coexist with or live with or co-create with. So with art, it's tough to really impose it because again, it's just about what works together.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. And I think one thing you mentioned at the beginning, and I see a question here, it's very exciting, is the Rumi musical, because I think many people are familiar with the poetry. And so could you share a little bit about that?
So Rumi was created with the mandate again to shift the perspectives on Middle Eastern figures, on Middle Eastern thought, because again we've been roped into this big monolithic entity. So Rumi is really humanizing this very prominent figure, this universal figure that's been associated with all of these liberal principles. What does it mean to live? What does it mean to love? What does it mean to grow? And we haven't humanized him before. We haven't really brought human to the forefront of our consciousness. And so he always remains this abstract thing, that comes from this exotic area. So now we're really sort of solidifying this area and making it exist in the minds and hearts of people and bringing the human element of him to the forefront. The real stories that we all associate with, that we all relate to: his relationship with his wife, his relationship with his adopted daughter, his relationship with his mentor Shams, the tension between everybody. So yeah, we really I think we create a very simple, well, we portray a simple story, but with very complex layers attached to it. And again, this is a multifaceted approach. It's through music, dialogue, and dance. Dance features very heavily in this. Um, and again, because of Rumi's philosophy and the notion of the twirling dervishes,
Right. Right.
which
So I get, oh, please continue.
yeah, which strives to untether your soul from the material confines that is the body. So movement plays a very strong role in driving the story forward.
Right. And then as you mentioned, is sort of moving from just like the audio to the visual and incorporating dance into your projects as well. So
Right.
so when can we see it?
So we will see this on the 23rd and 24th of November in London at the Coliseum. So that's
Oh, wow.
there for the first time. And I encourage everybody to come and call on producers and call on people that you guys think would want to help us bring this to other theaters around the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think I see people getting excited. So I think they're looking on Qatar Airways to see how they can fly to London in time for the for the production. But I mean, I of course the first thing that comes to my mind, selfishly, since I'm here in Washington, is when can the Kennedy Center have it? So
Yeah,
they have a
love to.
beautiful opera house. Yeah, that would be outstanding. Um, Speaking of traveling, many of us have been grounded for over a year and a half. What are some places that you're excited to travel to and perform? I mean, you've had some time to think about it.
Wow, I mean, we haven't even thought of traveling for a while, but of course, Rumi, um, I would be super excited to travel to Turkey to perform over there because I mean, our musical is set in Konya. That's where he spent the majority of his life and towards the end of it. So yeah, that's very relevant. Um, and yeah, for me, it's music and visiting countries within this sort of space just changes your experience because you meet people and you have experiences that are very authentic and real, and so you really start to experience the essence of the country, and that's what I look forward to again. And that's how I felt yesterday at the Kennedy Center. you know when people talk about art, when people meet each other under these circumstances, it's always quite deep, it's always quite meaningful. Conversations are always quite eye-opening and almost introspective as well. So it's been great. Like people really shed their layers and you start to see the real essence behind them. So I'm excited to start traveling with my work again.
Yes, and I'm so excited that you'll be able to sort of expand, and bring it to more live audiences. I think that's really, if anything, that I personally missed a lot. It's the live music and live plays. I mean, or even just eating in a restaurant in real life. It's really is a beautiful way to really sort of bring it back together. And I know that we only have a few moments left, and you have a very busy schedule, but I'm curious where you're headed next after your trip to Washington, D.C.
I mean, right now the intention is really to focus on Rumi. It's right around the corner. It's on 23rd and 24th. So, and of course, to, build partnerships, alliances, and yeah, try and get try and also get um, Indigo to be performed as many places around the world as possible. So, if you have any suggestions, please
Yeah.
put. So yeah, that's the focus right now. Now we finally showcased Indigo. The first single is out, and now we really want to start approaching theaters, people, investors to basically help put this together and take it on tour.
That is very exciting. Oh, well, I think, well, that is something we at WIT will certainly, we have chapters all over the world. So I know that we've recorded this interview and our communications team is going to share it, but that's something you have a ready-made fan base. wherever you travel, and many people will be pushing to have you on stage and to see how we can experience it live. So this has been such an honor for me personally. I mean, I didn't tell you at the beginning, but my family's Lebanese. So just having such a tremendous voice, literally, because you use your voice, but sort of role model. Because as you know, there is sort of an unfortunate stereotype when we talk about women in the Middle East, and to have somebody who's so brilliant and beautiful and bold and vibrant and extraordinarily talented is just truly, just know that it means a lot to all of us. And we really look up to you and our daughters and granddaughters. I don't have granddaughters, just for the record. Just really, it's wonderful to have that. And I think the timing is impeccable as we come out of this just devastating pandemic and look to how can we build more bridges, and doing that through your, I don't want to say music, because it really is an entire art form that you've created. And it really is something that I think will enable us to really see each other, right? And not all those layers that you talked about. And so I have one announcement I have to make, but before I do so, I wanted to just allow you to share any other thoughts or anything else that you would with our audience.
First of all, thank you so much for those kind words. It means the world coming from you. And for your support and for giving me this platform to speak about what I do. And yeah, and I just wanted to share my gratitude, and to also say that it is an honor and a pleasure to see institutions run by women, you know, these vibrant, strong institutions run by women. It's very inspiring, and it's a great, you know, it's a great example for our children. And by the way, my daughter's name is Layla as well.
Oh, great name, great name.
In my first album, Sandstorm, called Layla, so you have your, you know, you have your serenade there waiting for you.
Yeah, I have my theme song for life. I love it. This is great. Well, thank you again so much. And thank you for the entire team at WIT for helping us put together, as well as for the Embassy of the State of Qatar and their tremendous support. And first and most importantly, clearing your calendar so you could join us, because I know that was a very hard feat, but bringing this together, it's always a pleasure to work together. And I just wanted to share with my WIT colleagues that next Tuesday, October 12th, is our annual awards event. I can't say dinner because it's virtual, and it's going to be at 5:30 from 5:30 to 7. So please join us. And thank you so much. I wish you the greatest of success. And I'm literally going to look for tickets to London, because I think seeing that at the Coliseum would just be mind blowing. So
it would be.
See you there.
Please do come over, and yes, I can't wait to share that with you guys. Okay. Thank you so much. And again, thank you also to the Qatari Embassy for organizing this and for their support and giving me the opportunity to perform at the Kennedy Center.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.